Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon. We are recording this on May 12th of 2014. And Ramon, I'll tell you what, this has been a really interesting, really interesting year for me personally. And right along and in sync with that has been the lineup of guests we've had on. It seems like for one reason or another, and not necessarily consciously, we've been pulling guests in that have been right in alignment with where I've been going consciously myself, and it's just been an amazing growth year for me so far, and I'm just in constant awe. You've never heard me say that before, right? Oh man, this world is amazing. And there's something here I'm thinking about doing locally. I'm in Western Washington, and I know we've got a good chunk of listeners here in Washington State, Washington and Oregon. I haven't set up a date for it, and this idea is just budding in my mind right now. But this morning when I got to work, I looked up at the sky and it was crystal blue and it was just gorgeous. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be a beautiful day. And no sooner than I finished saying that than I looked up and saw one of our friends up there dropping this puffy little line across the sky. And now, as the day is nearing its end, we've got this nasty haze that's covering the whole sky, and the sun's still filtering through, but it is filtered by something that shouldn't be there. And I think what I'm going to do, Ramon, is I'm going to see what I can do for organizing some kind of a rally or something up at the Capitol here in Washington, and see if I can't get the attention of some of our local lawmakers to at least take a look at this stuff and maybe get us some answers on, have them look into it. And I know others have tried to do this before, but along the same lines. But I guess it's a squeaky wheel that gets the grease, and I'm about fed up with this stuff. So I guess my wheel's going to have to start squeaking.
at the very best, you'll bring together the like-minded people. So
Exactly. And at the very least, when you look up at the sky, this stuff is air pollution at the very least. I mean, it's, the airplanes should not be creating overcast.
Yeah, it's amazing because I told the story before, but when I was working as an English teacher in elementary school, I had one of the teachers look up, and he just gave me this glazed over look, like, yeah. And, he didn't argue it. He just listened to it. I said, but I can tell in his mind, he was just like, whatever. I was just amazed by it. But I found, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, people don't look up. They just flat out don't look up. It seems like their noses or their eyes are always at the ground.
But even if they do, it's almost like they don't see it.
Right. Well, it was such a gradual change that, it's the boiling frog syndrome. The changes, it happened so slow, and they implemented this so slowly that people didn't notice the gradual change until the water's boiling and they're going, ooh, I might be in trouble here.
Yeah. Here's a funny one I found. You know how sometimes Facebook, they put up those little pictures and they write something on it, and I posted it on the 100th Monkey Facebook. So if you guys aren't part of it, you can join us there. So it's a picture of Earth and Jupiter, and then it says CNN just said the world is in $40 trillion in debt. And then underneath, it says, who the fuck does the world owe? Jupiter?
Exactly, that's the point, yeah.
Well, if we owe Jupiter, that's, But anyway, here's a...
If it's any of the planets, it's got to be Saturn.
You think so?
Yeah, I think Saturn would be the only one that had that type of personality that would do the loan sharking stuff.
I thought we were paying for the restoration of Mars. But anyway, Dallas considers ending 5 decades of water fluoridation. Saves $1 million a year. Dallas City Council member decided to consider ending the fluoridation of the city's water supply. The decision was made after months of regular visits by citizens to city council meetings warning about the risk involved with water fluoridation. Dallas City Council members Shefi Kadane discussed ending the fluoridation with city manager AC Gonzalez. So, this is a good point here as the citizens. Yeah, what you were talking about. So I would say go for it, Tom.
Yeah.
So we have an amazing guest coming up, and before you say her bio, I was just amazed by her energy. But here's a funny one. I was listening to one of her interviews, Tom, and she's talking about this new phenomenon on Facebook. No, not so new, but the whole idea of selfies. And for those of you who don't know what a selfie is, that's you take your camera phone, you take a picture in the mirror, and there's just everybody always puts these up. And as she's talking about this, I'm scrolling down and looking at one of my old junior high school friends, and there goes the selfie. And then she even says, "Oh, here's my selfie for today." And it almost seems like people are addicted to it, so we'll get into that. But I just found that hilarious, the coincidence. Quinky dinky.
Wow.
So, Tom, who do we have?
That whole thing could go off into a whole big old thing about the ego and narcissism and all that good stuff. But anyways, we've got Alexis Brooks with us tonight. Alexis is a #1 best-selling author, journalist, essayist, and researcher covering metaphysics, spirituality, and new thought concepts. Her work, which explores consciousness, human potential, and the deeper characteristics of reality from a transcendental perspective, have been described by others as lucid and easy to understand in covering an otherwise complex and esoteric subject matter. She's a former broadcast executive, commercial copywriter, and voice talent for major market radio and television. She's parlayed her journalistic skills into her lifelong passion, working and interfacing with some of the leading researchers and experts in the field of consciousness and related subjects. Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio, Alexis Brooks.
Tom and Ramon, what an honor it is to be with you guys, the celebrities here. It's great.
I don't know if I would go so far as say.
Oh, don't be so shy.
Let me tell you one of our mantras: we're not professionals.
Absolutely not. We're just two guys that decided we needed to be proactive in some form or fashion. I mean, oh my God. I went back and listened to one of our first shows here a few months back, and I do have to say, and I have to pat both Ramon and I on the back, we have gotten a lot better.
Well, of course, with practice it happens. And let me just say to you, and I mean this not facetiously, I am really proud to see, first of all, the subjects that you're tackling, and really kind of proliferating what we call alternative news. Me coming from mainstream media back in the 80s, I'm dating myself. We never thought something like this was
You don't look a day over 30.
I'm a little over 30. But in all honesty, very, very happy to see people like yourself talking about the subjects that really matter and peeking under the hood, let's just say, as to what's really going on. So kudos to both of you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of age, something me and Thomas noticed, I've talked to a lot of people, and, a lot of people I see now, it's almost like they age better than when we were kids. Looking at the people our age, they look like they were just, ready to hit the grave. Like, I feel like, I don't know if it's because I was just younger eyes looking at them, but I feel like they look a lot older, and they also, if you remember, acted older than we did, because back then you never heard something you were talking about, and this is why I'm thinking of this in one of your interviews, how people will now say, okay, I want to better myself, I want to do something different, and they're in their 50s and 60s and even 70s. People are like, I'm going to go out and get a college degree and just do it to do it. Like a friend of mine, he's 72, 73, just graduated like a year ago from his bachelor's degree. And he doesn't need it. He's retired.
Yeah.
But he did it because he never done it before. And it seems that was unheard of when we were growing up. Of people just trying to better themselves once they were adults. It's like, this is the way I am and I'm stuck this way.
Right. Well, I suppose if you were to kind of philosophize why that may be, and I'm thinking why that could be, I can't really say that I know, except that, look, we are being surrounded, being beamed with information coming from all directions. And needless to say, particularly your friend who I think you said was in his early 70s, didn't have this type of access when he was school age. So, now a whole new dimension of information is opening up for us, and people want to participate. I mean, look at, our seniors that are now on Facebook. I heard you talking about selfie. We can talk about that a little bit later. Hopefully they won't start using that term. But, people are realizing that there are so many more channels of information available of all ages. And I think people want to participate. They're being encouraged to participate. There's a good side to that and a not so good side to that. But nonetheless, I think people want to get involved, and it's never too late. Never too late.
Yeah. With the older folks, I always find that their main reason for getting on Facebook, like my mom just got one. It's hilarious to me. But one of her main reasons was because she can see pretty much what I'm doing to a certain degree. Like, you know, pictures I post, and she's already was looking at my sister's Facebook. And so it's easier for her to keep in contact with me. And I noticed that with older people, that was the main issue. Like, keep in contact with their relatives.
Yeah, I would say so. And a lot of my peers, parents of kids friends of mine that have kids, and I ask them if they're participating in Facebook. Well, why are you doing it? Well, because I want to see what my daughter or son's doing. And it's the same thing. They want to snoop. No, I think it's a little deeper than that. We could go down a rabbit hole with that as well. The whole Facebook generation and what it's produced. But again,
Crackbook.
What did you call it?
Crackbook.
Crackbook, yeah.
There's
a double-edged sword there too, for sure.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you this. Excuse me. I have an article that was originally posted or published about a year ago, called Tethered to Technology, Have We Reached the Point of No Return, in which I highlight I'm not going to get into the crux of the article or the whole thing, but essentially looking at some of the behavior that it's proliferated, including narcissism, spying. These sorts of behaviors are being encouraged. I wouldn't call Facebook the culprit, but it's certainly, technology is neutral to me. It can be used with responsibility, for great things. And conversely, it can be used for things that are destructive. Unfortunately, I think we're seeing a trend of destruction, a tendency of not destruction, but, not such great behavior. But in any case, this article, I decided to repost it. It will be coming out on my blog, Higher Journeys, I believe on Wednesday, because I'm just seeing such an escalation in dysfunctional behavior based on, this technology. And it's so easy to put up your dukes when you're behind a screen versus getting in someone's face and telling them what you really think. So there's something a little disturbing about that trend, but I think it all kind of plays together.
Yeah, but also I see a lot of that and just the gossip that gets formed over nothing on Facebook. But on the other side of that, like-minded people that I never thought were like-minded, and I'm talking about people I grew up with. In particular, because a stranger, somebody you meet, you go somewhere, you meet them and like-minded, that's different. But someone you grew up with, you guys never talked about this, and all of a sudden you're posting similar things. And it's like, really? Wait, you're into that? Yeah. Oh.
Sure. Yeah. Well, This is what I call the dichotomy of consciousness. In fact, that's one of the chapters of my book, Conscious Musings. We're seeing literally the heightened sense of both. You've got the heightened dysfunction and what I want to say, apathy and greed, along with this heightened sense of connectedness and, discovering that we have similar, philosophies about certain things. And, so these tools that we call technology are being utilized for both. It's actually an interesting thing to kind of step back with unbiased introspection and look at. Very interesting.
It seems like I don't know if one is pushing the other, because it almost seems like me and Tom were talking about this actually before you came on to Skype with us, and how with some people, the more you put this kind of information out, the more it pushes them deeper into their slumber, and with other people, it brings them out more.
Sure.
And to look around and say, oh, wow, look, there's a window. Let me look out the window. So, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You continue.
And I was going to say that is it that one needs the other, or what is it exactly?
That's an interesting thing. Well, first of all, guys, you consider we've got 7 billion plus people on this planet, so you're going to have a potpourri of all things. But again,
not including aliens.
What's that?
Not including the aliens.
Right. That's right. Not even including them. But for the time being, we're talking about humans. Again, I kind of fall back on this whole idea of a dichotomy. I don't know ultimately what it means, but, or why now we're seeing such a, again, heightened sense of opposites with people. And why are some people, you mentioned the type of fringe subjects that I'm sure we'll be discussing tonight, and people just look at you, their eyes just kind of glaze over, where others are like, I'm kind of feeling that, and I kind of want to talk about that more. I think a lot of it also has to do with what we're indoctrinated into. Where are we and where were we spiritually and growing up? I personally grew up in kind of an alternative household. My parents, who I was just saying to someone the other day, my father would have been 103 had he lived. He lived to be close to be 91. But they were ahead of their time. They were talking about asking the big questions about reincarnation and extraterrestrial life and spirituality, and had me in meditation class at the age of 13. So, why them? Why were they like that versus, and they were both very mainstream people. My dad was a scientist, not a quantum scientist, a material scientist. And my mother was a high school educator. Why them and not, their peers? I don't know ultimately, but for me, I was indoctrinated with this growing up in this sort of an environment. So it was nurtured very early on for me. So I think you have to really kind of look at the whole spectrum of a person's life to see kind of why they are where they are at this time.
Right.
That's very rare.
As far as that dichotomy and the way things seem to be going to extremes, I kind of sense that it is a seeking of center. And for us to be able to find center, we have to know the extremes.
Absolutely.
Or we have no idea where that center point is.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So, I see, and this is a very new phenomenon on this planet. This whole internet and the closer connection that we all have, the closer communication we all have. This is all a relatively new phenomenon, and we just are taking our baby steps right now and trying to understand what it is that we've got our hands on. And eventually, I feel confident that the humanity as a whole, we will start to zero in on some form of balance with it.
Excellent point. I've got a couple of thoughts running through my head in terms of our being sort of in the infant stages of technology, but I'm going to admit something to you guys and your audience, and I hope I don't make any enemies in the process, but I'm going to say it anyway. Do you know, guys, I have always, or at least let's say in the last several years or so, as I'm watching this proliferation of technology, I've had this secret wish that the grid would go down for a week, let's say. And The reason why I say that is because, as I've said in my article, Tethered to Technology, have we reached the point of no return? Obviously, I'm illuminating more of the negative, sort of destructive aspects of technology, but I also talk about inner technology, but I'll deal with that in a minute. But what would happen? Let's say, God forbid, the grid went down. It's been talked about due to a number of things, perhaps high solar activity, whatever. Where would we be with our psyches at that point? I mean, you look at the people that cannot live without being on Facebook for more than an hour or two. And the people that are constantly, I think it was Tom, you were talking about people that aren't looking up at what's going on over our heads. Why? Because so many of them have their faces in their iPhones and their other smartphones and so forth when they're walking on the street. All of a sudden the plug is pulled. What now? And I posed that question to a few lay people on the street, and you want to talk about their eyes glazing over or their eyes bugging out? Oh my God, I don't know what I would do. I'd lose my breath. We're at a very, very critical and urgent. Really, this is what people have said to me. They really have, and that's disturbing. I mean, it may bring a chuckle at first, but my God, that tells me, have we passed this critical boundary? Have we reached the point of no return? My God, are we going out and taking walks anymore and looking up? Even though we're not going to likely see up there either, but what do you guys think? I want to ask you, what would happen if the grid went down? You think? How would you?
If I can take this question first, Tom.
Yeah.
I think, well, for myself, we've been preparing little by little just in case, but I think on average, it will be the same thing we were talking about earlier. For some people, it will be liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And for other people, it would just put them in deeper, if not make them even more like, pre-Renaissance kind of people. So I think it would make them more ignorant for some people, and for some people, they'll just like this joy and sting. But I think the first thing that will come into every single human person's mind is survival. So some people will become complete humanitarians helping the community. Other people will become vicious animals.
Yeah.
I agree to a certain extent there, Ramon. I mean, you're going to have the extremes, but I have a lot of faith in humanity. And case in point, there was several articles and letters that were written right after the earthquake there in Japan about how people reacted and how people that you wouldn't expect stepped out to help others, to make sure that everything was taken care of, that people had what they needed, that people took the responsibility upon themselves to care for their neighbors. And I honestly believe that the lion's share of humanity, the greater portion of us, would do something along those lines, that we would be human beings, instead of animals.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic point, Tom, and I want to sort of kind of follow that, piggyback on that. Interestingly, you said that the acts of kindness and altruism after this earthquake had taken place. What most likely happened when that earthquake took place? Technology probably wasn't available, so people are left to the very core of what they are, and that I really believe is good. This is why I think you're really underscoring my point that this sort of secret desire I have to see the grid go down just enough to see what people are really made of, and if there's still some humanity left in them, and I would suffice it to say there is, we may need something that earth-shaking to get us back to that. And I say technology is such a beautiful thing. Technology is like water. It can cook your food, quench your thirst, or drown you, or like fire, which can warm you, cook your food, or burn you. It's all in how you use it. It's neutral. But when we start making technology not something to augment a natural life, but replace it, and I think too many of us have, this is when we get into trouble. I really want to see us get back to our core, which I know is love. And again, in this state of dichotomy, we are seeing those acts of kindness proliferate as well. You know, another point that you made, Tom, about the sort of this dichotomy perhaps being indicative of not indicative, but I'm trying to think of what you said, a blending or an opportunity to kind of bring two together to create a blurring, which is sort of the point I made in my book, that, you know, when you acknowledge the shadow, I think it's important to acknowledge those little dark corners, the negative, the shadow, the bad, along with the love and light. When you recognize both of them, they kind of meld into each other and those polarities begin to blur. And, you know, I think that's what the alchemists knew. Perhaps we're getting to that point. So actually the dichotomy of consciousness perhaps is the precipice of change in the direction we need to be going in.
Yeah. One of the things I want to point out with the you know who were the number one people help? Because I was here for the earthquake. You know the number one people helping? It was two groups of people you did not expect. Number one was the Yakuza, were the more help than the actual government. And then number two were the
You may
foreigners.
need to explain who the Yakuza is, Ramon.
I've heard, yeah.
Japanese mafia.
Wow.
So the Japanese mafia were the number one, and right next to that, I don't know who helped more, were the foreigners. And you had these huge group of foreigners, you know, getting money together and doing things and taking it right to the people, because I was talking to this Japanese military guy, and they had like stacks and stacks of rice, and it was going bad. It wasn't getting distributed. And they were throwing out these sacks and sacks of rice that were just going bad. Were getting spoiled out in the rain. So I just found it amazing how the two groups you did not expect to be doing the most work were the ones doing the most work.
That is an interesting observation. And I think it bespeaks the fact that at our core we're good. Now, there are some people that I think, unfortunately, are inherently evil, but I think those are far and wide the minority and not the majority. So that's very interesting and encouraging, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah, those psychopath types, I think, are more like the 1%. But going back to technology, you know, I always like to, ever since the internet, I like to see what's the next game changer. And, you know, like we had the internet come on, and that just changed the game completely. The other one for me that I'm seeing right now is this 3D printer. Because again, like you said, it's like fire. You can warm yourself, cook your food, or you can burn down a whole village. With the 3D printer, you know, there's this guy who's putting on the internet how to print a gun, and he's got it. He's I forgot, what's that piece of the bottom, Tom, of the gun where you can shoot?
The hilt or the barrel or
the hilt, I think it's called. I'm not sure.
The hand grip part, or
no, where you put your finger in to pull the trigger. That whole area.
Yeah, I call it trigger.
Anyway, he's figured out how to 3D print that, and he's actually made it better, and to the point where somebody tried doing it here, and they were smart enough to put it on YouTube and got busted. Because guns are completely illegal here. But anyway, at the same time, on the other side of that spectrum, we've seen a lot of people do 3D printing and try to make like free energy devices with the 3D printing. And I call it a game changer because, of course, you're going to have those people who are going to try to print things that are not really helpful to humanity. But then on the other side, any idea you have, you no longer have to go to a factory and spend all that extra money. It's like all these new inventions are going to come out because of this 3D printing. I mean, we're 3D printing houses. And anyway, getting back to you, how do you feel about something like a 3D printer? What do you see in something like that?
Yeah, well, I have to be honest, I'm not that familiar with the technology. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times, but I really haven't looked into it, so it's hard to say. You know, I'm thinking, and I'm being a bit facetious, wouldn't it be great if they could print some 3D non-GMO vegetables?
I was just going right there. Our next step is going to be a food replicator. right?
Huh.
You know, let's instead of having that polymer or whatever the material is that they're using in those printers, let's have you know, some protein or, you know, carbohydrate based printing material, and, you know, print out. Well, you know, and that's probably a real crude description of it, but I mean, Star Trek, here we come. I mean, walk up and say Earl Grey, hot.
Yeah. Look, the possibilities are endless, but here's a point I want to make, and this too is mentioned in my my Tether to Technology article. I imagine one day, guys, that there is going to be something else called ISP. Now, we think of ISP as Internet Service Provider, but I like to think of ISP as intersensory perception. Intersensory perception, also ISP, can produce inner technology. You know, it's said that some of our indigenous cultures, we know the shamanistic cultures, could produce things in their hand. They didn't need a 3D printer, all due respect. I think it's great. But I fully believe that we have the wherewithal somewhere in our DNA that's become very atrophied that has the ability to produce things in our hands. It's been done. And I believe maybe one day we'll get there again. Maybe that's what this dichotomy denotes, a real game changer, so that we don't need, you know, I like to call it true wireless fidelity, true Wi-Fi. Right. We don't need to be connected to anything. So, you know, where I think these ideas are great, and I think what they really show is how novel the human species is, how creative we are. So if we can be creative and design, we know that there are many inventors who have been suppressed that have created many free energy devices that we may never see the light of day. But the net of it is that we are inherently creative, but maybe, I don't know, the universe is beckoning us to use that inner technology, that inner ISP. That's what I really like to see. And I think we're moving in that direction too.
If you have the faith of a mustard seed.
That's right. You got it.
Yeah. You know, there was something you mentioned, I've heard you mention many times, and with the inner technology and what it is, why are we kind of like faced or forced to start using that more, and how all these famous scientists have been using it, you know, starting with Isaac Newton and Tesla and Einstein, and how they really worked with their dreams and
absolutely. Yeah. That's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? You know, I talk about, I think I've referenced Sir Isaac Newton in particular in an interview or two of mine, as well as in the book. You know, a lot of people are not aware that this man was said to be a mystic, a shaman,
an alchemist.
An alchemist, absolutely. And that, you know, many of his discoveries, even though they were couched in a classical framework, were informed by his psychic abilities. Einstein, same thing. It's well known that, you know, many of his formulas were first brought to him in the dream state. There are countless records of these these absolute thinkers and thought leaders who shape the very antithesis of what we're talking about here. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to wonder, has there been a cover-up, let's say the word cover-up, about these very scholarly men who have been lauded in mainstream circles to show that, in fact, they were, at their truest sense, alchemists, psychics, and at a minimum open to these faculties. So it's very, very interesting to me.
I think it was Tesla who said the quote, "When we start studying the paranormal, then you'll see leaps and bounds in science," or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think there was another gentleman that said, the paranormal is normal, just not yet understood. Paranormal is normal, not yet understood. Yeah. So, you know, it seems like we're kind of moving in a cyclical fashion. It's not a linear process. It's cyclical. You know, these quote unquote pre-literate tribes people were instituting these sorts of faculties and gleaning information from, you know, the invisible world. You know, our previous, you know, thought leaders doing the same. And there was a time when science and spirit were inextricably linked, and then the separation somehow took place, and it became fragmented. So perhaps we're just doing a 360. We're just coming full circle.
So where are you along the lines of the whole rise and fall of consciousness, the yuga cycles?
Well, it's said that there was a fall from consciousness at some point, and, some have attributed it to, the Anunnaki, that era of, tinkering with the human genome and really kind of divorcing us from the continuum of consciousness. I don't know. I don't necessarily have a particular sense of that. You have to wonder. Because I have always felt, guys, that knowledge is within. Know thyself. Knowledge is within. The kingdom of heaven is within. That means something. That means that we have access to all things, but somehow, perhaps in the fragmenting of the left and right brain, I reference that as well. The ego has become way overstimulated, where the right brain is, fending for its survival, even though it's saying, hey, I may have a better idea than the ego. This sense of fragmentation shows that there was somehow a break up or break off of consciousness, perhaps to keep us all in check. I don't know. I have a feeling something went down that probably shouldn't have, though.
Yeah, well, I'm on the fence there, because I think this planet, or this solar system in particular, when I look at it in the grand cosmic scale, the galactic scale, and the path that this solar system traverses through the galaxy, and I understand just basic electromagnetism, positive and negative poles, and a dynamo, where the galaxy is a dynamo. It has a positive and a negative pole. Just like all planets, all circular or spherical bodies in the galaxy have poles of some form. And when I see that this solar system undulates above and below that ecliptic, I have to. I think I really feel like I'm onto something here as far as our consciousness is concerned. It's where the human form is an electromagnetic form. I mean, it operates on electromagnetism. All of our nerve impulses, that's basic physiology. So when you're immersed in a sea of negative, on the negative pole, it's going to have an effect on the physiology, on how consciousness is, what you have access to, as far as the vehicle. And when you're in the positive pole, you're going to have the difference of what you have access to. And I really feel that, we just crossed the ecliptic, and that we're coming into another polarity that is going to allow us once again, access to these other areas within this physiology that have been limited to us.
That kind of reminds me growing up, where you're around certain types of friends, if you want to call them that, and their energy is so low, and they think very shallow,
and they get you in trouble.
Yeah, and they get you in trouble. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you're around these people that support you and push you up, and they're doing their thing, and it's so easy for you to better yourself. And then when you're with the other friends, it's so easy for you to downgrade.
Let me give another example of that. I'd like to make a comment on that. I don't know if you guys play tennis or, a sport where you're, kind of a one-on-one sport. I played tennis once in a while with my husband, and he is much better than I am. And I noticed that when I'm playing tennis with him, by default, he tends to fall into resonance with the fact that he won't be playing as well as he would with somebody else that's better, because he's falling into resonance with my poor tennis playing. The point I'm making is that we're all, yes, we are electromagnetic in nature, and we live on an electromagnetic planet. But what we're seeing happening, I think, is falling into resonance with whatever that dominating energy is. So you had mentioned, Ramon, if you walk into a room with a bunch of negative people and all of a sudden you're feeling like crap, you wonder why. Well, the law of numbers say, That's going to be the more dominant energy, and you're by default going to fall into resonance with that. Conversely, the same thing with on the positive side. I mean, you take two. Have you ever done an experiment with if you've ever dowsed with a pendulum? If you take if you take two weighted pendulums and you hold them side by side and you start swinging them back and forth. Let's say one is moving at a more frenetic pace than the other. By default, by law, that weaker pendulum is going to immediately start to fall into resonance with the stronger of the two. So that, I don't know where we're going with this, but I think that's what we're seeing happen here.
Exactly. That's a very base example of a much deeper and more profound phenomena that we exist in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the other thing I've seen is, for example, someone who's very highly spiritual charged, they've been doing their work for God knows how many lifetimes, and they come into a room, and no matter how low that room is, they light it up.
Right, because their energy is stronger. That's right. Absolutely. That's the point, because their energy is stronger. And, I think another way of, so the question becomes, how do I make my spiritual self strong? So when I walk into a room, people will fall into resonance with me rather than me with them, pulling me down. And you know what I think the key is? Authenticity. You can't beat it with a stick.
Right.
Being authentic, and you talk about people and doing their spiritual work, and big sigh. Unfortunately, I think there's so many people with the best of intentions, and yet they're falling into a pattern of spiritual unsovereignty. They're doing lots of workshops and reading lots of books and listening to a lot of interviews and not really doing authentic spiritual work, becoming sovereign. Authenticity will make for a strong demeanor, a strong electromagnetic or a strong energy, a strong aura. That is what's going to convince people. I don't think you would even need to open your mouth. Have you ever seen a person walk down the street or walk into a room and they just seem to light up? You can almost see the aura around them, whether they say a word or not. And then maybe later you'll come into conversation with them and find out that they're a walking angel. And you said, you know what? I felt it as soon as they walked into the room. That's authenticity speaking. And
is that why a baby can come into the room and just make everybody smile?
Probably. Think of how pure a baby's energy is.
Right.
They just came from that place, if you will, that space of non-physical, I don't know what you would call it, what it is. I don't think it's a physical space, obviously, but yes, they're pure, they're innocent. They can't help but be authentic, even if they're crying. They really feel it. So yeah, I think that's a good example.
Yeah.
That's kind of covered in the first section of your book, that in the emergence of individualism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically, I don't know, the whole sovereignty word's been battered around so much, and it's been so polluted, and what that really means. So here we go. Alexis, what is spiritual sovereignty?
I look at sovereignty, or spiritual sovereignty, is waking up one day and saying, you know what? I'm going to explore and investigate what spirituality is. Well, first of all, I don't think it's kind of like happiness. People say, I want to, get this so I can be happy, and I want enough money to be happy. Well, people are kind of doing the same thing with spirituality. If I join this religion versus that, maybe I will become spiritual. You don't become spiritual. You embody spirituality. We are spiritual. On one level, spirit simply means breath. And if you're breathing, you are spiritual. So the question becomes, how do we sort of reignite that again, which may have become atrophied? My argument is that it's done through a very subjective investigation. Spending the time, you talk about spiritual work. Well, what is spiritual work? And at first blush, you would say, well, I'm going to meditate for 5 hours, and I'm going to maybe do some, what did I just do today? Actually, the Tibetan singing bowls, which I think are fabulous. But is that in and of itself spirituality, or spiritual sovereignty, I should say? No, I think those things are great, but I think an exploration, a true investigation into the depths of our soul. Who are we beyond the 3D? We know we're so much more. All religions tell us that, and I think we all know that. to be able to explore that through contemplation. And this is, if you guys have read my book, you know that is the mainstay of my message, that we can transform through contemplation alone, reflection. Reflect on when you just had an experience that seemed anomalous, a precognitive dream or an intuition. Well, what's going on there? Without ripping open a book saying, let me see what this definition says it is. Put the book away and look at yourself and just sit quietly and think, this is what sovereignty is to me. When you can say, I don't need someone else to tell me what it means to be spiritual. It's a very simple thing to do. And I really feel that maybe now, because we've got this barrage of places to go, I just came back from the New Living Expo in San Francisco, which is, I don't know, there were like 12 to 15,000 people there, probably looking at how to become more spiritual. So you had books and aura readers, and you can imagine, I'm sure you guys have been to some of these things. And I thought to myself, I just stood there and I said, God bless them. And I hope they're getting something out of it. But what about going back to your hotel and just sitting in quiet and contemplating your navel? No, I'm kidding. Not contemplating your navel, but just contemplating in general. Being aware of your surroundings, being acutely aware of your surroundings, looking at the sky, looking at nature. This is what it means to be sovereign to me, independent, not looking for someone else to tell you what it is to be spiritual.
Right. I kind of want to, if I can, I wouldn't call it digressing, but let's do this backwards, because usually in the beginning of the interview we find out about how our guest got into this. So let's do this backwards towards the ending of this hour. Okay. How did you start getting into this? Did you have like a proverbial 2x4 upside the head?
That's funny. Well, I think I mentioned briefly, excuse me, losing my voice here. I'm going to have to take a sip of water. Hold on, guys. Hold on. They're doing a little spraying today. And it's been a little tough on the throat here. Let me, I'm going to talk a little bit lower so I can keep my voice. I think I touched on the fact that I grew up in an alternative household. My parents were extraordinarily inquisitive naturally. I don't know where they got it from, but they didn't do a lot of traveling and a lot of things that normal families do, but they would sit around the table and talk about the latest in alternative health. And they would talk about, as I said, past lives and reincarnation and UFOs. I remember when they bought the book by Whitley Strieber, Communion. It's still sitting on my bookshelf. They just love talking about these things. And the good news is that as soon as I was old enough to pull up a seat at the table, they involved me in the discussions. And, they even valued my opinion on certain things. But here's what happened. At some point, I was just giving an interview to someone the other day where I said, I was telling the story of this book that I was reading, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the book. But part of the concept in this metaphysical book was the idea of simultaneous time. That time is not indeed linear, but is concurrent. It happens at the same time. And
Conversations with God?
Oh, no, way earlier than that, way earlier. Oh. That it talks about that. I mean, we may be talking about the Seth material, or I really don't remember. But I remember this epiphany that I had, and I'm reading this concept, and I said, oh my gosh, I get this. Why does this make sense to me? And I remember running to my mother at the time, God bless her, she's been gone almost 20 years. And I said, Mom, listen to what I just read and tell me what you think. So I proceed to tell her that in actuality, all time is simultaneous, and, we're actually simultaneously living in the past, present, and future. And she looked at me like I had two heads. She says, now that's over my head. And I'm thinking to myself, Mom, you're my idol in this type of thing. Can we like get into this discussion? She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, at that point, that proved to be sort of a marked change in my trajectory, let's just say. And I just became absolutely voracious in my studies, really wanting to delve more into these concepts. I will say that the Seth material, I don't know if you're familiar with, by the late Jane Roberts, was integral in my teaching many, many years ago. And so I just kept on that path. But I give credit to my parents who dragged me to transcendental meditation class as a family outing at the age of 13. Even though I was like boring at the time. Well, let me tell you, you know why I thought it was boring, guys? Not boring, but I mean, I'm 13 years old. What are you gonna do here?
Right.
I did practice this TM, and I thank the teaching to this day. But you know, if you're familiar with transcendental meditation or any other specific modality of meditation, there are rules that you have to adhere to. You must say this mantra. And I remember my instructor saying to me during class, don't ever tell anyone your mantra. We come to find out there are probably thousands of people that have the same mantra. And, you know, make sure you sit in this pose, and it's got to be exactly 20 minutes. And, you know, that's what was boring to me. And so what I ended up doing, I said, that's not fun. I want to explore and figure this out on my own. And so I started making up things on my own. I switched up my pose, and if I wanted to do it for 15 minutes or 10 or an hour, I did that. And I dropped the mantra altogether. And you want to know what happened after that? Really amazing things started happening. I started getting visions and more precognitive dreams and a sense of euphoria and a couple of on the verge of out-of-body experiences. This is what I'm talking about when I say spiritual sovereignty. Something even at 13 told me, I'm not having that. I'm going to play by my rules and let's see what happens. So I had the gumption to do that and, you know, started developing kind of a sense of spiritual sovereignty. But long answer to your short question, that's kind of how I got started.
I like that. I mean, I always say that there is no wrong way to meditate.
No.
You know, and I say that in particular to meditation. People have asked me, you know, well, how do you meditate? You know, and well, you know, there is no wrong way. This is how I do it.
That's right. That's right. That's great. That's great. And, you know, I prefer to just call it silence. You know, I think people get a little tripped out when you start mentioning terms and specific modalities, and, you know, they get intimidated by that. And I think we make it too complicated. I was recently watching an interview with Russell Simmons, who we know is an avid meditator in the hip hop world, right? And he's giving an interview. And if you know Russell Simmons, he's very candid. And he was just describing meditation as forget about all this hoopla about, you know, what you got to do and meditate. He says, just sit your ass down and be quiet. You should have seen it. It was so funny. I was cracking up. And I bet you he affected more people. He probably has more meditators than ever now just by saying, just sit your butt down, would you? And be quiet. That's what meditation is.
Yeah, you know, especially, you know, no offense to the far right Christians, but one of them was like, oh, you do that meditating thing, and they looked at it as such an evil thing. I said, did you even know what that is? And I was like, yeah, when you pray to Buddha. And I was like, oh my God, you're so off.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah. See the damage that can be done. So that's why I tell people, look, shut the book, walk out of the workshop. By all means, do it once in a while, but don't make it your bedrock. Because what happens is we misconstrue the message and the point of it all. Something so beautiful about personal exploration. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. So I encourage people to do that.
All right. So Conscious Musings, where can people pick this up at? Well,
currently it's available on Amazon, just on Amazon at the moment, both in Kindle and paperback, but soon to be ready on iTunes. Oh, I'm sorry. You can order it from barnesandnoble.com. But it will also be available on Nook. But right now, Amazon is where you can get it.
Are you going to have it turned into an audiobook also?
Well, you know, it's interesting that I did sort of a what I would call an abridged version of Conscious Musings, which was a collection of contemplations about life and potentiality back in December of 2012. And that was in spoken word format. This is a different experience. It's the unabridged, even though it's a relatively quick read. So people have asked me, I think I'll probably look into doing that, but it's only been out about a month or so I want to kind of see how this does.
Nice. So what else is planned for the future? You got another book working or?
Not for a while. This has been a beautiful process, don't get me wrong, but it's an arduous process, boy. Writing, any author will tell you. And it's, a mentor of mine had said, when you write the book and you finish it and it's published, then the work really begins. It's doing the circuit and the traveling and the defending it and, getting the reviews. So yeah, not for a while, but I will tell you, my radio show Conscious Inquiry is doing quite well. Just finished interviewing Dick Gregory. Man, whoo, that was heavy, out in San Francisco, Dick Gregory. And, so I've got some great guests lined up, for Conscious Inquiry. So we're just going to, keep the book thing going, keep talking to great people like yourself, and let's see. You know what they say, when people plan, God laughs.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep it really spontaneous.
I was laughing when you sent that email saying that. Just to let the audience know, in the second hour, we're going to talk about reincarnation, and we're going to start off with pets because you have an amazing story about that, and so does Tom as well. With the reincarnation, and also how it seems like you don't. Sometimes for me, like we have a cat, or she has us, better said. We didn't adopt her; she adopted us. Yeah. It wasn't our choice. But anyway, I'll leave it at that, and we'll get into that deeper in the second hour.
All right, Alexis's website is higherjourneys.blogspot.jp.
Higherjourneys.com. We'll make it really easy.
Higherjourneys.com. Get there? Awesome.
Higherjourneys.com.
Okay, well, I'm just sitting here landed on this webpage, so I just read what was there. All right, higherjourneys.com. And we will be back after a short break for the second segment. And if you're out there listening to us on one of those other media outlets, iTunes or the YouTubes or Vimos or wherever it happens to land, and are interested in checking out Hour 2, I would urge you to go over to the100thmonkeyradio.com and become a member and be a monkey. Help support Ramon and I and all the people. We love you guys, and we'll see you in the second hour. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
Namaste.
Solve the problems that divide the world of black and white. In the race